essentially, by saying the second decree, he canceled the first. But our Rebbe, the seventh Rebbe of Chabad, pointed out, the words are, was on the 23rd day of Sivan, and Hashem told Mordechai, and the king told Mordechai to write whatever he wants. So the Rebbe then said that there's something unique about today, that every Jew could write his own agenda. So we know that Hashem listens to all of our prayers every time, anywhere, any place. But then there are what we call auspicious days, days which are more opportune. So today it's not well known. This is something that the Rebbe taught us. Today, basing himself on what the prophets wrote, that on the 23rd day of Sivan, the king, in this case, we could say it's Hashem, telling Mordechai, who's the tzaddik or the Jew in general, that write what you want, whatever you want, write, and I'll fulfill it. I'll have the authority of the king. So all of us need blessings, many for health, many for wealth, many for domestic harmony. There are so much that we need. So today is a good day to ask the king, because the king gives you permission to write your requests. And may Hashem answer those requests in a way that we could actually see it in the physical in the physical world around us. Okay, so the Rebbe writes over here in today's thought. So I'm going to read it. It's a long thought, but it's beautiful, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. In the year 1874 or 1875, the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, said to his son, he said like this, he said, the Yetzer Hara, the evil impulse, is called an animal soul. Now you would think an animal has no brains, but that's not true. It's not an animal soul because it's brute. At times, the animal could be a fox, which is like the most cunning of beasts. And you have to be very wise to know what does this evil inclination want. In fact, at times, it may clothe itself in the garb of an earnest, straightforward, humble tzaddik, possesses fine traits of character. In other words, sometimes your evil inclination, the desire to do the desire that we have inside of us, which comes from animal nature, which wants us to do what is not right, doesn't come and tell you that you should do something wrong. Sometimes it presents itself as if it's really very righteous. Then, second paragraph, the animal soul manifests itself in each person according to his individual character. One person may suddenly experience a powerful longing to study Hasidus or to meditate deeply on some Hasidic concept. The truth is, however, that this is nothing more than the Yetzer Hara's counsel and the animal soul's machinations to prevent him from engaging in the Aveda of davening or in a similar activity. In other words, you're ready to daven, or you're in the middle of davening, and suddenly you decide, I should learn a mimer. So instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is to actually say the words and talk to Hashem, you're going to convince yourself that studying about God's greatness is more important. So of course, we're stuck. How do you know what's from the good side of us and what's from the bad side? So paragraph number 3. Take this as a general principle and remember it always. Any matter that is effective towards or leads to active avoda and is confronted with opposition of any sort, even the most noble, that opposition is the scheming of the animal soul. The son listening to his father, the Rebbe, the fourth Rebbe speaking to the potential fifth Rebbe, said, until then, I had not known that there could be a religious animal soul. And certainly I had no idea that you could be a Hasidic animal soul. So I want to talk about the advice that the Rebbe gives, because it is so practical. And we don't have to be great Hasidim for this. This is really down to earth, ABC, that has an impact on me. It will have an impact on you, and it will have an impact on anyone that you meet who's a little bit confused whether they're doing something right or wrong. But again, this is what he says. Anytime you're either motivated or on the way to do something good. Over here, the word good could be substituted for something of a mitzvah. You're going to it could be you're going to work. It could be you're going to school. It could be you're going to visit your parents. It could be you're going to daven. It could be you're going to study. It makes no difference. And then suddenly you remember that you were supposed to be doing something else. No matter how noble that something else is, if it's going to interfere with the mitzvah that you're going to do right now, so then chances are a very high probability that it's coming from the forces of evil. Because the immediate effect is that you're not doing what you set out to do, which is a mitzvah or your responsibility. Even though you're substituting it with something else that seems to be kosher, it seems to be okay. But the reality is it interfered with with what you set out to do. So let me tell you some very practical things that I deal with, and I'm sure you deal with the same. Let's say, for example, I say to myself, okay, I want to go downstairs and study a little Torah. I'm on my way down and I realize, I didn't do an email. I had set aside, I was going to write a little note to someone who I haven't seen in a while, which I consider as a mitzvah. I'm reaching out and not asking for money, just saying hello to give them like a little bit of a support. So now I say to myself, look, I got two mitzvahs. I'm going downstairs to study some Torah. I could always study Torah after the email. And I could also have another mitzvah. I forgot to do the email till now. So there's a chance that I might forget after the study of Torah. On the other hand, it's very possible that I could do it after the study of Torah. So what should I do? So say to yourself, isn't this amazing? I only remembered to send the email when I was on the way to study Torah. When I was on the way to give myself a coffee break, it didn't occur to me that I should spend that time doing the email. But suddenly when I'm going to study Torah, now I remember, this is coming from the animal soul that's getting dressed up like a shaliach. In other words, it's not telling me to do something wrong. It's telling me, you know something, this is part of your job description, so go upstairs and do what you're supposed to do. But one second, I should have done it earlier. I could potentially do it later. Why now? Because you don't want me to study. Always use this. In all, there's exceptions to the rule, obviously, but almost always, when you're on the way to do something right, okay, and then suddenly something is going to interfere by telling you do something else which is good, that's not coming from the side of good. Now you have to remember the father who was the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, Reb Shmuel, who was talking to his son, who was a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik, and the grandson of a tzaddik. What does he tell him? He says, you know, you're in the middle of davening or you're about to daven, and now suddenly you say, you know, I should go deeper into a Hasidic thought. I could only envy such a Yetzer Hara. I wish my animal would tell me, you know something, what you know what you should do? Indulge in immersing yourself in godly thought. How fortunate we would be. But for the Rebbe Rashab, who's in the formation of patterning his life to be a righteous tzaddik, his father was telling him, 1 second, is that what you should be doing now? Or should you be davening now? Should you be actually saying the words of prayer now? If it's going to stop you from the words of prayer, I think that's what it means, the words of prayer, but he calls it avodah, then you should not do that. So your wife asks you, help me out a little bit over here. Can you go shopping, do this and this? And you're on the way to do what's correct to help your wife. And then suddenly you remember, oh yeah, I didn't call my mother yet. Okay, it's a big mitzvah to keep in contact with your parents, to show respect. But again, you had time before. Chances are you could make time later. Why now? Because now you're involved in doing a mitzvah of helping another Jew, helping your wife, which is hakaras hatov, which is showing gratitude, and which is necessary for domestic harmony. This is a mitzvah. It's a divine, it's a good energy you're bringing into your life and into the world. But suddenly you remember another mitzvah. So that's, again, it's what we would call, like in a different setting, the Rebbe once pointed out, you could have a Yetzer Hara that's wearing a shtreimel, you know, like that fur hat that very pious and learned Jews wear on Shabbos, which used to be a sign of nobility, like a Rebbe or a Rebbe's family would wear it. So you could have a Yetzer Hara like that, where he appears in the most lofty and the most pious and most religious, to take an extreme example. Okay, this is very extreme, and you should take it like that. Let's say you have a love for Shabbos, so your Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination, might come and say, if you truly love the Shabbos, you would be willing to sacrifice yourself for Shabbos. So go out and throw rocks at a human being on Shabbos and say to them, Shabbos, Shabbos. Maybe there's a source of sincerity there. I don't know. Maybe. But does that make it any less heinous? Does it make it any less wrong? Another way to see it is, what will happen when you throw the rock? Will this person become a Shomer Shabbos? Will he start keeping the Shabbos? Or will he just simply avoid this neighborhood? I've never heard in the history of 50, 60 years that a person decided to become a Sabbath observer because someone insulted him for breaking the Sabbath. Though I've heard of many stories of people who became Sabbath observers when they were befriended and were shown friendship by people who keep the Shabbos. So not always is going to do, in italics, a good deed, actually a good deed. Always challenge yourself and ask, now I should say always, because sometimes it's quite obvious, but there are times where you have to challenge yourself. I want to do this good deed. Is it interfering with performance of a mitzvah? Even if it is a mitzvah in itself, or you would think it might be a mitzvah on yourself, but if it interferes with a practical mitzvah, then chances are a very high probability that it's not coming from your godly soul, it's coming from your animal soul. So this is partially what the Rebbe is teaching us today in his thought. And again, I relate very closely to this thought because it seems to me so eminently practical when a person is confused whether I have two paths at this moment, what to do. Ask yourself, when did you get this option? Was it when you decided to do a good deed, or was it or to begin with you had two paths? Okay, if in the begin with you could go to the right or to the left, both of them seeming to be good places to go, then I don't know what to tell you. You have to think about it, talk about it, whatever. But very often you're on path A, and then suddenly, path B is also good. No, that's coming from your Yetzer Hara. Okay, let's open up the Tanya. We're on the top line opposite page 216. Yesterday, I spoke about, basing myself, of course, on the holy words of the Tanya, about the idea that Hashem responds with an act of kindness when we on earth do an act of kindness. And that would explain that even though a person studies Torah, the Talmud says if that's all he does, and he does not occupy himself with deeds of kindness, deeds of goodness, even Torah he does not have. Okay, top line. Now he's going a little bit deeper. We know that the Torah comes from Hashem's wisdom, and actually without the study of Torah, there would be no existence to the world. Without people occupying themselves with it. And as we know, Kibi Diburam, when you speak the words of Torah, because when you speak words of Torah, you awaken the bright lights and the influence of supernal wisdom, which is the source of Torah. You actually bring down or bring forth wisdom into the letters of speech, Shenivra Elam, in which the world was created. Ukamayim Razal, as the sages of blessed memory taught, Al Tikra Benecha Ella Beinayach. Torah scholars are not only children of Hashem, but they are Beinayach, they're builders. Because again, the creation is created and sustained with the 10 sayings of God, the 10 utterances of God. So that's speech. What feeds speech? Thought. So when the Jewish people study the Torah, which is its source is God's wisdom, and Hashem responds to their words of Torah that are being studied, he then draws into his speech a new vitality. So actually, when you're studying Torah, you're creating the world. So why did he quote the Talmud that says that is not enough? You also need kind deeds, gemilas chasadim. So he explains, this drawing down, he bechinas yurida gedela. This is a great descent. It is true that speech is fed and nourished through chachma. So it's true that when we study Torah, we're building the world because we're strengthening the words. And yet, this is all in a spiritual plane, in a spiritual dimension. In order for God's kindness to create, to materialize in the physical, we need additional energy, additional power to draw forth the divine influence. So for that, we have to awaken Chesed Elyon, supernal kindness, Hanimshach Kamayim, which is drawn from water, Mimokim Gavaya Lamokim Namach. As we know, the nature of water is to descend. As we see this in terms of water on earth, we see this from a rain that goes down, right? It descends to the world. So kindness it has that character of water to draw downwards. So, when there's an arousal from below on earth, with charity and with kindness below, what we're able to do is draw chayim v'chesed, life and kindness, to keep alive the spirit of the lowly and the crushed. And this is what it says, a wise person should not praise himself with his wisdom, but rather, this is a quote from Tanakh, where the prophet says, let the wise not show off with his wisdom, rather let the person who does tzedakah v'chesed, such a person, ki'im, if you want to know what we could be proud with, with this a person is praised with his acts of kindness. Why? For I am Hashem who does kindness. Because it's kindness which draws forth the life of wisdom to below. The ilav, and if he has if he does not do the acts of kindness, it's called his wisdom, but there's no life from it, God forbid. Very, very powerful, spiritual statement. I'll repeat it again, his words, and then modify it a little bit in a more contemporary form. There are two things. There's an aspect of wisdom, or sometimes we call it intelligence, and there's an aspect of kindness. The kindness that we're talking about is human kindness. I spoke about this yesterday. We're not inspired by the kindness of animals. We are inspired by the kindness of humans. Whether or not we could use the word kindness by an animal is a separate discussion. It's all instinct. But even if we were to see that, it would still not inspire us to do kindness because it's a different world, a different species. So when there's intelligence without kindness, there is no life. To point this out in a very practical sense, he's talking about, again, the Holy Tanya is talking about it in the terms of that Hashem is infinitely. The word infinite, again, we use the word loosely because in language, we don't really have a term that could explain beyond infinity, beyond understanding. So we'll just use the word infinity. That this Hashem is infinitely greater than what he created. And as he gave this remarkable insight, it's like taking an entire it's like taking an entire book of great scientific or great philosophy and taking out one word and saying, okay, this is it, and taking out one letter. So in our world, it does not exist. But Hashem, who has 22 letters, in which he used, this is the material that he used to constantly create. And there's a cosmos. Again, we only talk limited in terms of planet Earth, but we don't talk about in terms of the angels that are found and creatures and perhaps beings that are found in different worlds. Right? All of that was created through the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And ultimately, all of that is expressed in one letter. So we could understand that Hashem, who is infinitely removed from creation for him to, and again, italics in parentheses, to pay attention to us after he created it, it would necessitate an act of kindness, tremendous kindness, unparalleled kindness. Even by us, me and you, even by us, if we might have made a little project in second grade, chances are, if you're a grandfather right now, you don't really pay attention. It's been thrown out for decades. But even if it would be somewhere found in an attic, and your grandchild runs down with a piece of popsicle sticks and says, Zaidi, what is this? And you're trying to remember, oh, when I was your age, I made it. He says, oh, he begins to cry. I broke it. I'm so sorry. Is that really going to bother you? I mean, this is not even a silly example. It's just a practical example that things which we outgrow, things which we're much greater than, we pay no attention to it at all. So again, exponentially a gazillion times and more. For Hashem created creation with a breath of his being. Why would he pay attention to it anymore? Yet the traditions and the truth is that Hashem does pay attention. He constantly is thinking about what he created. His beloved children are the Jewish people, and it's very significant, every single thing that they do. That's a kindness from Hashem. In order for us to awaken that kindness, Hashem said, I decree, if you will do acts of kindness, I will pay attention and respond with kindness. And I spoke about this yesterday. This is in itself an act of kindness, an act that we do not understand. Why should our acts of kindness awaken Hashem's kindness? But that is. And it's a paradox. What in this world we pay so much attention to, which is the mind. And sadly, we pay attention to money, so we use the mind very often to make money. But it's really intelligence that we hold so much in esteem. The Talmud, as much as it extols thinking, studying, and we are people of the book, and our rabbis are always studying, what nourishes creation is the acts of kindness. If you look at, for example, some other faiths, I'm not going to mention, but from the description, you'll be able to figure out other faiths. And you will see that there was a group of people that had access to wisdom. They were able to read, they were able to write. By and large, what they did was they secluded themselves from society. Very often, the people of society, realizing the gap between them and the others, would support them. Occasionally, it brought to jealousy and envy and anger, but many times it brought to respect. But was life being bestowed? They separated themselves. It was almost as if they're involved in the world of thinking, and then based on their thinking, devotion, but they really didn't care about the society around them. There was no life. Wisdom without kindness is not life. If you actually examine in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, you will see that certainly in the Hasidic world, which is like 300 years old, the greater the tzaddik, the greater the thinker, the more apparent it was his acts of kindness. But even before, if a person was a great Torah scholar, even if he himself was not involved directly into acts of kindness, in the shtetls in Europe for almost 1,000 years, it was the rabbi's responsibility to make sure that the city or the town or the village has a society to feed the poor, a society to help people get married, a society to visit the sick. So even if he himself was not doing it, it was his responsibility, because Torah without acts of kindness does not build a universe. It might build a spiritual universe, but not a physical universe. Perhaps, and only perhaps, this is another insight into what our Rebbe, the seventh Rebbe of Chabad, who for all practical purposes is our Rebbe today in the year 2021 in the secular calendar, he taught us that with all of Torah knowledge, which is vast, there's so many books and so many teachers and tremendous amount of Torah knowledge that's available today and is being produced today, you may not forget about the simple act of helping a fellow Jew. And every Farbrengen and every Sunday for almost 6 years, the Rebbe stood on his feet and counseled and advised and inspired and advised, etc., etc. And the message was go and share an act of kindness with someone else. Because if we're really preparing ourselves for a good life, a spiritual life, which will be ushered in by the Mashiach, it has to come with an abundance of acts of kindness. Okay, we'll end off with this beautiful thought. I wish you a very good day. Today's Thursday. Tonight, God willing, we'll learn something of Chassidus at 7:30 and have a wonderful day filled with kindness. Shalom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Okay.